So there's two theories that really explain what happens in Trunks' life. One being the existential anxiety and meaning making, more defined as nihilism, which was a term iconed by Nietzsche. And the other one, which we famously call now PTSD, and that's a 20th century renaming that we have, but it is actually called survivor's guilt. And this term was coined by this doctor called William G. Niederland. And he introduced this term because in the Holocaust, when the survivors left and they said, "Oh, we're free," they had a feeling of punishment that many of the Holocaust survivors felt, and they said, "Well, my friends died, and my loved one died," and they felt bad, and it was a traumatic event for all of them. So I started with point number one. Existential psychology basically says that as humans, we're stuck grappling with some terrifying realities, and we will always be stuck grappling with those terrifying realities for all of our life because we're just mere mortals. We're ultimately alone in our heads. It's me, myself, and I. The universe doesn't hand us a prepackaged purpose. We have to find this purpose on our own, and some people don't find this purpose and go down a very tragic path. And like it or not, we're totally free to choose, but we must bear the responsibility for our actions and for those choices. And this can create a special kind of anxiety that's less about fear of a specific thing, but more about a deep discomfort by existing in a seemingly indifferent universe where everything is so bleak and dark. And it's all about the big, scary realities of being a human. But in this case, it's of being a half-breed human saying, like the fact that we all die, we also have all the freedom and responsibility of our choice. So to cope, what do? We try to create or discover meaning, and either through personal relationships, through missions, which is really going to be the goal and the point for Trunks, and through values that gives our lives purpose. So let's apply this to future Trunks. In Trunks' timeline, everything is bleak. Everything is death. Everything is dark. Everything is over. And the androids roam around destroying cities. They destroy everything they see. They're even worse than the androids that we know from the present timeline or the past timeline, however you want to call it. But for the sake being, I'll call it the present timeline. And they're killing people at will. There's no order. There's no safety net. And there's very little hope, if any, because he tried fighting them. And every time he fights them, he loses. He gets completely destroyed. And it's like the whole world was swallowed by this existential nihilism that is the androids. And after, an even worse android comes, and this is Cell. And everything feels so random and meaningless. So there's a reason we call it the most dark timeline. It's dark for us as humans. I can't imagine for someone who lost his only one and his best friend, and seeing the way he died must have been tragic. And for a kid like Trunks, growing up in fear, with no father, his father was killed very tragically, he had no chance, and no guarantee that tomorrow even exists. Those existential realities become brutally real, and they became so real that they triggered the most iconic Super Saiyan 1 transformation that goes unnoticed throughout the whole saga. Death for future Trunks, it's everywhere. He's surrounded by it, his own friends, his loved ones, his family, his mentor, his so-called brother. They're all gone, and they're gone in terrific ways. Does he have freedom and responsibility? He has freedom. He has responsibility, but there's no freedom. His only freedom is the crueling responsibility that he has to defeat those androids and save his only loved ones Bulma. He's practically the last line of defense for humanity. Is he isolated? Yes. He's got Bulma, but no one can really grasp the burden that he carries by seeing Future Gohan die like this and seeing Vegeta die like this. We see it that when he sees Vegeta for the first time, he says, "Father, this is you." And he's so amazed by it because he did reach the legendary Super Saiyan transformation. He did become the strongest being in the universe. And he is amazed by it. So we can see that isolation takes effect when he goes back into the past. Does he have a sense of meaning? He doesn't have a sense of meaning. His only meaning is to try to defeat those androids, but he can't even do that. He's not strong enough. So the androids' actions are just mindless destructions, no reason, no plan. It's not like it was Zamasu. It's not like it was Babidi. It's not like it was Cell. Cell wanted to absorb those androids. Those androids had no plan. It was just violence. So to Trunks, that must feel like he's living in something that is really a joke. I mean, you can't imagine a child living through this. You're like, if you're a child, there must be something else for this world, not for him. So Trunks responds to this nihilistic world by forging his own sense of purpose, saving the timeline. So how does he want to do that? He goes back into the past. He travels back to warn Goku, "Hey buddy, you're gonna die of a virus." And we can see the effect that those androids had on him because he eventually defeats Mecha Frieza, the reconstructed version of Frieza, with no problem at all. He just destroys him in 2 seconds, and then he destroys King Cold the same way. So then he travels back to warn Goku and fights relentlessly to try to stop the androids and Cell. He knows that there's no second chances, and it's really evident by from the time he arrives in the past to the time he leaves. So he arrives, he warns Goku that there's no chance. He goes straight to Goku because he's heard so many great stories about him. He then finds that the androids on this timeline are not actually the androids that he has seen in the past. It's Android 19 and Android 20, Dr. Giro. And he's like, what? This can't be true. And then it's just a complete shattering of his reality. You can see that when they want to go into the cave where Dr. Giro grows those androids and grows Cell, Trunks just snaps. And he powers up to Super Saiyan and tries to blast through this cave, say, "We're not going to revive none of those androids. Nothing. I've seen the death that it causes in my timeline. I've seen what it does. I will not let you do this. I don't care if it's Goku or Vegeta or my father." This trauma overtook him. And then we see that when his father gets completely destroyed by Android 18, it was a reminder of what happened to his father against Android 17. And he jumps into the fight, tries to fight Android 18. They both get completely destroyed. Completely. They absolutely have no chance. And this awakens his trauma that he saw in his future timeline. So that forces both of them, him and Vegeta, to finally train into the hyperbolic time chamber. And that's what eventually saves Trunks in his future timeline. But they come out of the hyperbolic time chamber as the strongest and most powerful beings in the universe. They're stronger than 17, they're stronger than 18, they're stronger than Cell's second form, they're stronger than Cell's first form, stronger than Goku and Gohan, stronger than all of them. And that goes to Vegeta's head. They eventually fight Cell's second form. It's a piece of cake for Vegeta. But we can see that as Vegeta's winning the fight, Trunks senses something. He senses that Vegeta is toying with Cell. He senses that he wants to use this toy that is his newfound power. And Vegeta is about to let Cell go and make him absorb 18. But he can't just sit back and watch. He can't. He chooses a heroic set of values and he lives by them. This is the meaning and the making in action. I mean, we can see it. Trunks says, "I've seen it all my life. I've seen the terror, the death that it caused. I can't let you I can't let you let Cell become perfect. There's no way. There's an existential despair that hits Trunks. He says, I don't care if you're my father. It even surprised Vegeta. And I couldn't even say it made him proud when he beamed him away and he fought Cell, fought Vegeta at the same time. He tried to hide the androids all at the same time. You can see the desperation in Trunks. He desperately needs everyone to understand how real the danger is because Vegeta doesn't. He doesn't. Trunks has lived through it and he makes it very clear. And if they don't, then all his suffering, all Gohan's sacrifice will be for nothing. And that's the worst nightmare for someone clinging to a self-made purpose. He also experiences a brief existential crisis in a scenario where his intentions are labeled as evil. This is where we jump to Dragon Ball Super. Zamasu comes in the Goku Black arc and tells him that you are evil. You are evil. Your actions are evil. You play with time. You fuse. You guys are just mere mortals. And you do those actions of a god. And then Zamasu calls Trunks out. He cannot defeat Goku Black in his timeline. He cannot defeat Zamasu in the future timeline. In the present timeline. So even if his heroic actions are seen as bad, he snaps and he says, what's the point? What's the point? And he becomes Super Saiyan Rage. So he says to Zamasu, fine. You tell me my actions are evil, but then that's what I'll be. And this is an outburst of the existential rage that finally comes out. He finally comes out when he becomes Super Saiyan Rage, his own unique transformation that no one else in the series has but him. But in reality, it's much darker than this. He's just fighting back against the void that he has inside of him that keeps threatening him to swallow his purpose. So Future Trunks is not just a PTSD case. He's battling an existential dread. And that bleak worldview that he has is a direct result of Future Gohan's timeline and his death and the bleak and grim environment that he grew up with. And it's a future where heroes were lost and a world where chaos wins and it's merciless. So when Future Gohan fails, it's not merely a personal tragedy. It kickstarts an entire chain of hopelessness. We can see it in his actions against the androids. We can really see it in his actions against Zamasu, that he finally transformed into Super Saiyan Rage. He realizes no one can save him from this and dark, evil God. It's not Vegeta that can do it. It's not Goku that can do it. It's not Vegeta that can do it. It's him who has to do it. And he finally fulfills and defeats this void that he has inside of him by confronting the nihilism head on. Because the darkness isn't just what got the planet destroyed. It's that Trunks had to fight to construct meaning in a place where there was no meaning. It was him, Mai, and Bulma. And this is an existential weight that none of the Dragon Ball cast never has to face. We can say that Gohan has a similar traumatic life. But that existential weight is something that only Trunks can say he lived through. So then, Trunks also is an image of the survival guilt and the burden of responsibility. So the survival guilt happens when you make it out of a tragedy that no one else does. And a tragedy that someone else, often more deserving or more capable, did not survive. Future Gohan was more capable. He didn't deserve to die, not at all. I mean, I don't think there's any human here that's going to debate that Future Gohan deserved to die. and you feel shame or guilt for living. Trunks did that in the future timeline. And it can drive you to prove you that you deserve that life. You deserve it. And not only do you deserve it, but everyone else who survived deserves it. So there's few characters in the Dragon Ball Saga that really exemplify the survivor's guilt. And he's literally the survivor in a world where almost every fighter has died. That's literal. That's not an exaggeration. And more specifically, his mentor, Future Gohan, died a horrible death protecting him. Gohan was the stronger warrior than him. He was the strongest human warrior left at the time, human insane warrior left at the time. He was the one who had all the potential, and he was Trunks' brother. Yet Trunks is the one who outlives him. Can you imagine that? The weaker one outlives him. The stronger one sacrificed himself for him. And that set Trunks up for a huge, huge emotional burden. The guilt of not being strong enough. He was just a kid. He was just a kid. But that doesn't erase that I should have done more. He wanted to do more. He tried to do more, but he couldn't do more. He tried to say, hey, Gohan, let me fight with you. But Gohan said, nah, you're the future. You're going to find a way to do this. I have faith in you. And he knocks him out and eventually dies. And Trunks has a need to honor Gohan's sacrifice. Every day he lives, Trunks feels obligated to make that survival worth it every day. That's why he trains relentlessly in the hyperbolic time travel. That's why he trains to finally defeat those androids and refuses to let the androids continue their wrath in the past timeline. Gohan has the mindset of I must protect everyone. He's hyper vigilant, zero tolerance. We can see that when he fights Cell, he comes back into his timeline. He eliminates the android and he doesn't mess around with Cell first form. He talks to him for 2 minutes and says, it's over, Cell. The nightmare is over. Goodbye. And in his mind, if he hesitates, people will die and that guilt would double. And this is exactly why you see him pleading with Vegeta, pleading to not let Cell achieve perfection. He's traumatized by the idea of an even more powerful monster than the one he's lived through. And Vegeta does not listen to him. So, Trunks is carrying this immense responsibility to the Zamasu arc. He has a feeling that he has to save his timeline because he did. He saved his timeline. He even defeats Boo. But everyone's deaths in this timeline are still upon his shoulders. That's the guilt that he has. Even when the situation is basically unwinnable, Trunks needs to fight on, and often blaming himself for when things go wrong, especially against Zamasu. But eventually, against Zamasu, he embraces his evil side. This is why he's able to defeat him finally. So, the survival guilt turns Trunks into a darker, more serious character that we usually see in Dragon Ball. He cannot be carefree like Goku. He cannot be as prideful as Vegeta because he has this unspoken debt to a deceased mentor and a destroyed world that is not your typical hero's journey. This is a hero being forged under the weight of a deep-rooted guilt and responsibility that will never truly fade. And why does this amplify the darkness of Future Gohan's failure and of his timeline? Because if Future Gohan had survived, Trunks wouldn't be the last Saiyan in his timeline, and he might not carry this enormous guilt. Hopefully, he was able to have babies with Mai, but we'll see. Gohan's death doesn't just mean losing a hero, it means losing a brother. It means Trunks bears the guilt of the survival. He bears it on his chest and he hides away from it. He's haunted by it. Why him and not me? Why, Gohan? Why did you have to die? I was the weaker one. And that's a heavy mental load. And that rewires how he approaches every battle, every threat, and every relationship. We can see that when he leaves the timeline after defeating Zamasu, when he goes into his ship with Mai, he says, he cries to Gohan. He tells him how Gohan is finally happy. And that's was such a stark realization because in his timeline, Gohan was a warrior, but he sees Gohan finally as a scholar. He sees him. He's like, you're so weak compared to how you were before, but this is exactly what I wanted to be. And this is what you became. And he finally takes wipes his tears away. And he says that, goodbye, Gohan. He says bye to his mentor, and you can see that when he takes on into this ship with Mai, the only ones that fly to him are Piccolo and Gohan, because there is this deep-rooted connection between both of them that no one has. Only him and Gohan will understand. Even though future Gohan doesn't know past Gohan, there's this mystical relationship that they have between each other that will always carry on forever. And this is what makes the ending really of Dragon Ball Super and the Zamasu arc. Yes, it's a bit of a sweet and sour ending because he finally defeats Zamasu and goes back to his timeline. He knows that what he has to do to defeat all the evils in his world, because he cannot go back and always depend on Vegeta and Goku. But he realizes that finally Gohan is happy. And happy not for the reasons he thought he would be happy, for the complete opposite. And this is what truly makes future Gohan's failure, the failure of Trunks, and future Gohan's death even more dark than it truly is, because it has ripple effects all the way to the Zamasu arc. So together, these forces really make future Trunks a far more tragic and complex hero than your average character. While Goku and his friends in the main timeline enjoy repeated wins and resurrections for that fact, Trunks lives in a reality where the big heroes are lost. There's no do-overs, there's no Dragon Balls, and there's no magical fixes. The psychological scars run deep, and that's precisely why the story is so much darker than we often acknowledge.